Small, small experiments against usury. Throughout history, there have been multiple experiments against usury, all of them achieving tremendous success. These have been completely buried and purposefully forgotten in order to hide the truth about our money and preserve the power of money changers and their enslavement of mankind. When these experiments are noted, the elites try to dismiss it as nonsense, funny money, unworkable, inflationary, and etc., or the nature of their economics is obscured by focusing on other factors. Of course, they offer no solid proof for their claims. Controlled opposition like Marxism also fails to properly address the topic. They focus on non-issues like private property and don't say a word about loan capital, the true culprit for economic exploitation and poverty amidst plenty. This article will explore some of these experiments. We will talk about examples which either abolished interest entirely or suppressed it to the point of irrelevancy. We will, in this article, limit ourselves to small-scale experiments only. We will not talk about larger-scale ones like Lincoln's greenbacks, colonial America's scrip, Gaddafi's Libya, or National Socialist Germany. The only exception will be Quebec, French Canada. An obscure example, even among those who push for banking reform, is how French Canada saved its economy in the 1600s by issuing its own debt-free currency. The colony of French Canada relied on an annual delivery of money from the French king to keep itself running. However, in 1685, the king failed to provide the colony with said money. Normally, under our current system, the economic elite would have told everyone to balance the budget, increase taxes, and resist the hardships by any means necessary. Here enters the governor of the province, M. de Mule. Mule was someone who was not educated, indoctrinated, into orthodox economics, as such, when facing the problem. Instead of taking any usurious loans and limiting public spending like a good slave, he had the brilliant idea to just create his own money. Since he didn't even have a printing press, he had to improvise. He ordered everyone to turn in playing cards and cut them in quarters, wrote the value that each one represented, and put them into circulation, guaranteeing the people that it would work. Look and behold, it did. While France fell further and further into debt, the colony was able to maintain itself. In the documents relating to Canadian currency, exchange, and finance during the French period, from the Public Archives of Canada, Mule reports this: "My lord, I have found myself this year in great straits with regard to the subsistence of the soldiers. You did not provide for funds, my lord, until January last. I have, notwithstanding, kept them in provisions until September, which makes 8 full months. I have drawn from my own funds and from those of my friends all I have been able to get, but at last finding them without means to render me further assistance, and not knowing to what saint to pay my vows, money being extremely scarce, having distributed considerable sums on every side for the pay of the soldiers, it occurred to me to issue, instead of money, notes on playing cards, which I have had cut in quarters. I send you, my lord, the 3 kinds. One is for 4 francs, another for 40 souls, and the third for 15 souls, because with these 3 kinds, I was able to make their exact pay for 1 month. I have issued an ordinance by which I have obliged all the inhabitants to receive this money in payments and to give it circulation, at the same time pledging myself, in my own name, to redeem the said notes. No person has refused them, and so good has been the effect that by this means the troops have lived as usual. There were some merchants who, privately, had offered me money at the local rate, on condition that I would repay them in money at the local rate in France, to which I could not consent, as the king would have lost a third. That is, for 10,000, he would have paid 40,000 livres. Thus, personally, by my credit and by my management, I have saved His Majesty 13,000 livres. De Meules, Quebec, 24th September 1685. This is just common sense that is clouded by years of economic indoctrination, by people who want nothing but our servitude. Schwanenkirchen. After World War I. Germany was in an apocalyptic shape. The whole country had been plundered by the victors of the war and its populace financially enslaved, with a hyperinflation soon following. It is in this context that in 1929, Max Hebecker bought a bankrupt coal mine in the 500 citizens town of Schwanenkirchen. For 8,000 Reichsmark, he then exchanged 40,000 Reichsmark in the Werra Barter Trade Company, established by Hans Timms, a follower of the unorthodox economist Silvio Gesell. Max issued said amount in the company's own demurrage banknote and persuaded the workers of the mine to accept said scrips as wage, which would then be accepted as alternative money by the town's people. Said scrips were redeemable as coal and as conventional Reichsmark. The Werra vouchers levied a fee of 1% every month on the holder, paid to the coal mine and used to fund the publicizing of the system. Therefore, it was in the interests of the voucher holders to keep spending them into circulation prior to arrival of the month's tax. The town prospered with this, while the rest of Germany fell into economic despair. The number in circulation was never more than 20,000 Werra, because they were kept in circulation. 2.5 million people used them as a means of exchange. In November 1931, the government prohibited the Werra and the economic disgrace resumed. Virgil, an experiment of the same nature of Schwanenkirchen, was carried out in the town of Virgil in Austria, with a population of 4,300, following the same economic principles established by Silvio Gesell. This, along with the example of Guernsey, are perhaps the most famous of the cases presented in this article. Irving Fisher states about this in his work Stamp Scrip. Herr Unterguggenberger had watched the Schwanenkirchen Werra experiment with intense interest. The solution of the Wargel situation pointed to stamp scrip. The town would issue it, with the consent of the workmen and of a sufficient number of the merchants and also of the local savings bank. The bank was to hold the guarantee fund, in the form as previously described of a bookkeeping transaction. There was to be no final redemption, and the stamps, at 1% per month, were to be sold by the town and the proceeds used for the enlargement of the town's welfare work. But though there was to be no final and complete redemption, every holder of the scrip was to have the privilege of redeeming it at the town treasury or at the local banks at any time. But for such redemption, a service charge of 2% had to be paid. As the stamp was only 1%, the disadvantages of redemption at 2% were, at any given moment, greater than the probable disadvantages of going on at 1%. Redemption, therefore, was not likely to hurt the circulation of the scrip. Moreover, the banks and the town were to reissue any that was redeemed. And so it worked out in practice. All city employees, including the mayor, were to receive 50% of their salaries in scrip, and the new emergency workmen were to be paid 100% in that form. According to plan, on August 1, 1932, 32,000 shillings worth of the scrip, equivalent to about 4,500, was issued in denominations of 1, 5, and 10 shillings. This amount was later found to be in excess of the actual need, and instead of following an inflationary policy, only about L3 of the issue or less was kept in circulation through reissues. The rest remained with the city. This showed great wisdom on the part of the municipal administration, as it kept the purchasing power of scrip at par with regular shillings. The scrip was called Wergel Certified Compensation Bills. The monthly stamps, affixed to the face of the scrip, were named Relief Contribution Stamps, and each unit of scrip was superscribed, "They alleviate want, give work and bread." What were the results? In the first half of 1932, there was a drop in unemployment, public works had been started, streets rebuilt, an expanded sewer system, etc. Fisher further states, on January 1, 1933, Wurgel, which is an alpine town, had under construction a new ski jump and a water basin for the fire department. The mayor says that the scrip has fulfilled all promises and thinks it should be adopted nationally. At all events, a neighboring city of 20,000 inhabitants was, at last reports, considering the introduction of scrip within its borders. Under the advice of the mayor of Wurgel, and of a university professor of economics, and the Wargel experiment has begun to attract somewhat general attention in Austria. As conclusion to this report, Mayor Unterguggenberger stated, "The stamp scrip of Wargel will have historic significance because it has kept its promise to provide work and bread. It has, in fact, fully satisfied all our expectations." In 1933, the Austrian bank prohibited the stamp scrip, and the town returned to pre-scrip levels of destitution. Stamp scrip in the United States. During the Great Depression, various cities in the United States adopted the stamp scrip in order to alleviate their economic sufferings, as written by Irving Fisher. The town of Hawarden in Iowa was one of these. With 3,000 people, the finances were in good shape, but unemployment was really high. This prompted the town to issue $300 in stamp scrip of 1.0 lira denomination. The sum was to be used principally for a town road to be built by otherwise workless men. The scrip was redeemable, although there was no advance redemption fund. The stamps alone are the guarantee, and they are sold by the town at 3 cents per dollar of scrip, which is redeemable whenever 36 stamps, aggregating $1.08, have been affixed. There is no set period, however, for affixing the stamps. The agreement is merely that one stamp is to be affixed with each transfer of the scrip so that the redemption date is indeterminate. Another town was Roussel in Kansas, with a population of 2,000. On December 21, 1932, the municipality issued 300 in scrip, exclusively in a 50-cent denomination, although the plan has helped in the clearing up of debts among the local merchants. Some observers regarded it as only partially successful. It is suggested that not enough care was taken in pledging the cooperation of the community beforehand. In the town of Rock Rapids in Iowa, it was issued $250 of scrip in exclusively 50-cent denominations, redeemable with 54 stamps, costing 1 cent each. The purpose was to help the unemployed. People were reluctant to take the scrip from the merchants, but the turnover seems to have been once every 4 days. The town of Albia in Iowa issued $401 in a 50-cent denomination, redeemable by 54 stamps, 1 cent each, affixed with each transaction. The entire group of business and professional men were re-employed, and there were no difficulties. It is said that useful work has been done for the city which would have been impossible without the scrip. Other towns include Evanston, Illinois, Granite Falls, Minnesota, Nevada, Iowa, Pella, Iowa, Magnum, Oklahoma, Eldora, Iowa, Jasper, Minnesota, Merced and Anaheim, California, Lexington, Nebraska, Enid, Oklahoma, and Knoxville, Tennessee. More about these examples can be found at the book Stamp Scrip by the economist Irving Fisher. Guernsey. After the end of the Napoleonic Wars, Guernsey was in a terrible shape. The town was underdeveloped, roads were in disrepair, dikes were collapsing, the economy in shambles, a huge unemployment, and the worst of all, the sea was washing away large tracts of land. The island could not borrow money, as it couldn't raise taxes to pay interest. An excerpt from the booklet How Guernsey Beat the Bankers by Edward Holloway shows, in this island, eminently favored by nature, nothing has been done by art or science towards the least improvement, nothing for the display or enjoyment of local beauties and advantages, not a road, not even an approach to the town, where a horse and cart could pass abreast, and the deep roads only 4 feet 6 inches wide, with a footway of 2 or 3 feet, from which nothing but the steep banks on each side can be seen, appeared solely calculated for drains to the waters which, running over them, rendered them ever yet deeper and narrower. Not a vehicle, hardly a horse kept for hire, no 4-wheeled carriage existed of any kind, and the traveler landed in a town of lofty houses, confined and miserably paved streets, from which he could only penetrate into the country by worse roads, left the island in haste and under the most unfavorable impressions. In 1813, the sea, which had in former times swallowed up large tracts, threatened, from the defective state of its banks, to overflow a great extent of land. The sum required to avert the danger was estimated at more than $10,000, which the adjoining parishes subject to this charge were not in a condition to raise. The state of the finance was not consolatory, with a debt of $19,137 and an annual charge for interest of $2,390. The revenue of $3,000 left only $600 for unforeseen expenses and improvements. Thus, at the peace, this island round itself, with little or no trade, little or no disposable revenue, no inducement for the affluent to continue their abode, and no prospect of employment for the poor. It was in this context that in 1816 the state decided to issue £6,000 in debt-free and interest-free notes. These notes were largely successful, having created debt-free prosperity and boosting the tourism industry on the island, and also fixing all the problems that striked Guernsey. Complaints by bankers were made because of the debt-free notes, although these were largely unsuccessful due to their effectiveness. This prompted two banks on the island to flood Guernsey with their own notes to undermine the state notes, which lead to the island to agree to partially limit the issuing of the state notes. No explanation for what happened can be found, merely an exchange of letters between representatives of the banks and the bailiff of the island. With the outbreak of war in 1914, Guernsey restarted the notes issue according to requirements. While the state notes continue to circulate alongside British pounds, there has never been inflation, and the prosperity of the island continues as it has since 1820, with minimal taxation. Stephen Mitford. Goodson states of the condition of the island, "Today Guernsey has a population of 65,400, which enjoys one of the highest standards of living in the world. There is a flat income tax rate of 20% on worldwide income capped at $220,000 per annum. There is no company tax except for a 10% tax on certain banking activities, no capital gains tax, no inheritance tax or estate duty, no purchase or sales tax, no value-added tax, VAT, and no capital transfer tax. Guernsey has neither a national debt nor any external debt." Edward Holloway states about the success of the policy. On 29 March 1826, a further issue was authorized to rebuild Elizabeth College, which had been founded in 1563 by Queen Elizabeth, and some parochial schools. The bailiff of that time, Daniel de Lisle Brock, in his address to the States Assembly, expressed his belief that the creation of this new money was a great benefit to the states, and caused no inconvenience because of the great care with which it was issued. Various other creations of new money took place for projects of rebuilding, widening the streets of St. Peter Port, reconstructing some of its buildings, making new roads and public works of many kinds. The experiments continued over a period of 20 years, by which time the people of Guernsey had developed from a depressed, unhappy state to a position of prosperity and happiness. The following brief quotation shows how improved was the situation as a direct result of the wise and statesmanlike action of the island parliament. Banco Palmas. The origins of the Palmas Bank in a slum of Palmeiras in the city of Fortaleza, Brazil, lay in the economic quagmire of the community in which it is located, which lacked basic infrastructure such as sewage system, water, roads, etc. This prompted them to create their own community bank that issues its own currency, the palma, with interest rates so low they are almost non-existent. Based on economic solidarity, the philosophy behind this alternative economy is that there is no such thing as an inherently poor territory, but it becomes poor by losing its savings due to interest and buying non-local products. This alternative currency greatly elevated the economic situation of the slum, fixing the lack of basic services, creating various social projects, incentivizing local production due to the currency being unaccepted outside of the community, and by boosting customer loyalty by giving discounts to Palma users. Due to the loans having extremely low interest rates, it made it easy for the establishment of new businesses. Thanks to this initiative, over 200 new jobs have been created, and that is just the numbers from years ago which I have found. The citizens of the community practically don't know what the real Brazil's national currency is anymore. The bank offers different interest rates depending on the type of microcredit, all of them being extremely low. Credit for consumption, production, and services range from 0.5% to 3.5%. Credit for productive inclusion ranging from 1.5% to 2.5%. Credit for home renovation on 2.5%, and credit for local consumption with no interest at all. The success of this initiative was so great that it inspired the creation of over 50 other community banks throughout Brazil. Local exchange trading system. The local exchange trading system, or LETS for short, is an exchange model that allows for people to exchange goods and services by using a local currency. It was first established by Michael Linton in 1983 in Comox, Canada. In order to better explain it, I will let Margaret Kennedy talk about it. Whatever a person may be prepared to pay for a task or piece of work is credited to the account of the one who performs the task and debited to the account of the person who buys the service. Interest is not paid for either credits or debits. Since the value of the normal clearing unit, the green dollar, is equal to the Canadian dollar, inflation works as a circulation control since unused credits devalue at the rate of inflation. Because everyone is responsible for the cooperative debts, namely for unpaid debts, it is important that people know each other and learn to trust each other. Limiting a LET system to a locality makes sense at the start of a program until more people learn to come to terms with the responsibility the system demands. Unfortunately, it has not been possible to pay taxes in green dollars. If such payments were made possible, then the local municipality or county would become partner of the LET system and would be able to finance investments in green dollars. The advantages are obvious. Local people grow richer and the state or municipality gets access to an incredibly inexpensive work creation program. This system allows for people otherwise unable to use their abilities in the economy to be able to flourish, decentralizing the economy away from big corporations and into the hands of the common people. To cite Margaret again, the LET system is immune from local or international recessions, interest on debts, thefts, and money shortages. The world money system can collapse, the dollar or DM can lose their value. Unemployment may rise, but the green dollar still functions because it is guaranteed 100% by work and by goods, and only functions if people cooperate in a direct exchange. Its main strength is that it cannot be used for the purpose of speculation or one-sided enrichment. The Jack Network. The Jack Network is a cooperative institution in Sweden with historical precedence in 1930s Denmark. Said bank does not offer any interest on money lending, as it has the aim of helping the local economy and prevent economic injustice. To cite Kennedy again, the long-term socio-political aim of the Swedish JAK cooperative is to make interest unnecessary so that an economy can exist in balance with nature, without inflation or unemployment. Members are distributed all over the country. Early in 1991, the Swedish JAK group had 3,900 members and a total turnover of 34 million Swedish crowns, about US 15 million. Already in 1993, the membership had risen to 38,000 and the turnover to 600 million Swedish crowns, SEK. Since everyone saves at least as much as they borrow, it is obvious that the total system maintains